The royal hall of the Zayari Empire was unlike anything Commander Elias Marr had ever seen. Tall crystal pillars reached into the sky, glowing with a soft blue light. The floor was made of smooth silver tiles that reflected every step. Strange banners hung from the ceiling, each painted with curling symbols he could not read. The air was warm and filled with a faint hum, like the sound of a giant heart beating somewhere deep below. Elias had been on many worlds before, but nothing compared to this. This was the first official meeting between Earth and the Zayari, a powerful alien empire known for their advanced technology and strict traditions. Every movement here had meaning. Every word mattered. And today, every eye in this hall was on him. The queen sat on a high throne made of some shining black stone. Her crown was thin and shaped like the wings of a bird. Her eyes, bright and golden, followed him as he walked forward. She was tall, elegant, and somehow gave the feeling that she could see through him. Elias reminded himself of the one rule he had been told again and again: do not joke. The Zayari do not understand humor. His crew had been very clear about that. Their culture valued seriousness and direct speech. Any strange or playful comment could be misunderstood. He took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. His mission was to secure a trade agreement between Earth and the Zayari. If this went well, humanity would gain access to their energy crystals, powerful, clean sources of power that could change Earth forever. A royal translator stood at his side, ready to repeat his words in the Zayari language. The queen raised a graceful hand, signaling for him to speak. "Your Majesty," Elias began, his voice steady but his heart racing, "I bring greetings from Earth and the hope for a peaceful, prosperous future between our peoples." The translator spoke, and the queen gave a slow, polite nod. "So," she said, her voice deep yet smooth, "what does your world offer in return for our trust?" It was a simple question, but Elias froze for a moment. His mind scrambled to remember the prepared lines: trade routes, cultural exchange, mutual defense. But the silence in the room made him nervous. Too many faces were watching. Too many golden eyes. Before he could stop himself, he blurted out, "Well, how about me?" The words left his mouth faster than his brain could catch them. He meant it as a light comment, a way to ease the tension, an offer to dedicate himself personally to the alliance. But the moment he said it, he remembered the warning: do not joke. The translator hesitated, clearly unsure, but repeated the words in the Zayari tongue. The room went silent. Truly silent. Even the low hum in the air seemed to stop. Elias felt heat rising to his face. Oh no. Had he just proposed? He looked around. The Zayari guards stood like statues. The courtiers exchanged puzzled glances. Somewhere in the back, someone gasped. The queen stared at him for a long moment, her golden eyes unblinking. The silence stretched until it felt like the whole hall was holding its breath. Then, to Elias's shock, the queen laughed. It was not a small laugh. It rang through the hall, a musical rolling sound that bounced off the crystal pillars. The courtiers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked surprised, others confused. From what Elias understood, the queen rarely laughed, if ever. "All right," she said, still smiling. "I accept." Elias blinked. "Wait, what?" The translator repeated her words, but they didn't make any more sense the second time. He hadn't expected her to take him seriously. Surely she knew it was a mistake. Right, the queen rose from her throne. She stepped down the silver stairs slowly, her long robe sweeping behind her. Her presence filled the space between them until she stood only a short distance away. "You are bold for a human," she said, her voice warm but carrying an edge. "Few speak to me in such a way. You offer yourself? Then you will remain here, by my side as my consort advisor." Elias felt his heart stop. consort advisor sounded far too official for his comfort. "Your Majesty, he began, but she raised a hand, silencing him. "In our ways," she continued, "such an offer cannot be withdrawn without insult. You have honored me, and I will honor you. Together we will see if this human spirit is worthy of the Zayari." The hall erupted in murmurs. Some faces showed shock, others disapproval. A few Zayari seemed almost amused. Elias's translator leaned closer and whispered urgently, "You may have just agreed to a royal union. Be careful what you say next." Elias tried to explain it was a misunderstanding, but every attempt was twisted by the translator into something respectful, almost ceremonial. The Queen seemed to interpret his hesitation as a kind of human humility, a strange ritual before acceptance. "Prepare him for the union ceremony," the Queen ordered her aides, "and make ready the trials." The word trials made Elias uneasy. That did not sound like a simple handshake agreement. The Queen turned back to him. "You will have the honor of showing me what humanity offers the stars. Fail, and you will return to your world with nothing. Succeed, and you will have my ear in all matters." Before Elias could reply, she gave a final smile, the kind of smile that made him wonder if she knew exactly what had just happened, and walked back to her throne. Elias stood there, frozen, as the aides came forward to guide him away. He had come to discuss trade. Somehow, in less than 5 minutes, he had been volunteered as the Queen's personal advisor, and possibly something more. As the great doors of the hall closed behind him, his mind spun. Was this all a misunderstanding? Or had the Queen planned it from the moment he entered the room? Either way, he was in deep, and the union ceremony was coming. Elias woke the next morning in a room so large it could have fit his entire apartment back on Earth inside it. The walls were covered with glowing designs that slowly shifted color, like living art. A thin mist filled the air, carrying the smell of something sweet and strange. Soft, steady music seemed to come from nowhere. He sat up on the bed, or at least what the Zayari called a bed. It was a smooth, floating platform that adjusted to his shape. Comfortable, yes, but it felt more like sleeping on a gentle cloud than a mattress. His mind was still trying to process the events from the day before. He had gone into the royal hall to offer a trade agreement. He had walked out, or rather, been escorted out, as the Queen's so-called consort advisor. The more he thought about it, the more he wondered if the Queen had understood his comment perfectly, and simply decided to play along. A knock, or maybe a musical chime, came from the door. Before he could answer, the door slid open and a tall Zayari woman stepped in. She wore a silver robe and a narrow headpiece, shaped like a crescent moon. "I am Lyra," she said in perfect, calm English. "Royal aide to Her Majesty. I will prepare you for the union ceremony." About that," Elias said, raising a hand. "There's been a huge misunderstanding." Lyra tilted her head as if the concept of misunderstanding was something curious. "In the Queen's court, there are no misunderstandings, only opportunities." Elias opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. He could tell from her tone that this was not a conversation he could win. Lyra handed him a small tablet with a glowing display. Strange symbols appeared on it, then quickly translated into English. Terms of the Union. Participant will undergo the 3 trials to prove worthiness. Upon success, participant will serve as personal advisor to the Queen for a term of 1 Zayari cycle. Failure will result in immediate termination of the Union. Elias pointed at the last part. "Termination. Meaning I get sent home?" "Meaning," Lyra replied carefully, "you leave without honor, and your world leaves without alliance." That made his stomach sink. This was no small game. If he failed, Earth could lose its chance at trading with the Zayari for decades. maybe forever. What exactly are these 3 trials? Elias asked. They are tests, Lyra said, to measure intellect, adaptability, and heart. They are not physical battles, but challenges of mind and spirit. The first will be tomorrow. Elias exhaled slowly. Great. Any tips? Lyra gave a small smile. The Queen enjoys surprises. The rest of the day was a blur of preparations. Elias was shown the palace gardens, a maze of glowing plants that hummed when you touched them. He was taught the proper bow for addressing the Queen and the correct way to accept food from royal servers. He learned that Ziyari meals were eaten in silence as a sign of respect and that one must never turn their back on the Queen when leaving her presence. In the evening, he was led to a dining hall where dozens of alien dignitaries were seated. The Queen sat at the far end, her golden eyes scanning the room like a hawk watching a field. Elias noticed how every Ziyari moved with precise grace, as if the air itself was a delicate fabric they did not want to disturb. Midway through the meal, the Queen addressed him. "Tell me, human," she said, her voice carrying across the hall, "what do you hope to gain from this union?" Elias set down his strange, glowing fork. "I hope," he said carefully, "to build trust between our worlds, to learn your ways, and to share ours." A murmur moved through the hall. Some Ziyari nodded slightly. Others narrowed their eyes. The Queen watched him for a long moment, then said, "You speak as though you mean it. We shall see." Later that night, Elias walked through a quiet corridor toward his quarters. The silver tiles reflected his footsteps. He was almost at his door when a soft voice spoke from the shadows. "You don't belong here." Elias turned. A Ziyari man stepped forward, wearing dark robes without the golden patterns the others had. His face was sharp, his eyes cold. "Who are you?" Elias asked. "Someone who knows the Queen's games," the man said. "The last outsider who entered the trials vanished before the final one." Elias felt a chill crawl up his back. "Vanished? What do you mean?" The man gave a faint, humorless smile. "If you wish to survive, human, you will fail the trials quickly and leave with your life." Before Elias could reply, the man stepped back into the shadows and was gone. The next morning, Lyra came to escort Elias to the Queen's audience chamber. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, scattering rainbow colors across the floor. The Queen was already there, seated on her high throne, flanked by guards in gleaming armor. "Elias Mar of Earth," she said, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Today we agree on the terms of your challenge. Do you accept the 3 trials?" Elias hesitated. Every instinct told him to find a way out. But he could also hear the voice of Captain Rourke, his mission commander, back on the ship. "If you succeed, Earth gains an ally beyond imagination." He squared his shoulders. "I accept." The Queen's golden eyes seemed to shine a little brighter. "Good. The first trial begins at dawn tomorrow. You will be placed between 2 rival houses. You must settle their dispute without lies, without force, and without leaving either side in disgrace." Elias blinked. "That's specific." "It is ancient law," the Queen said. "If you can master the art of balance, you may yet master the rest." She stood, her robe flowing like liquid light. "Fail," she added softly, "and our talks with Earth will end before they begin." The room was silent except for the faint hum in the walls. Elias felt the weight of 100 golden eyes on him. Somewhere deep inside, past the nerves and confusion, a spark of determination lit. If this was the only way to help his world, then he would find a way through, even if the Queen herself had set the path full of traps. The morning of the first trial came with a golden sunrise spilling through the tall crystal windows of Elias's room. The palace felt different today, quieter, heavier, as if the air itself was watching him. Outside, the gardens glowed with soft colors, but the beauty did little to calm his nerves. Lyra arrived, as always, with the same calm expression. "It is time," she said simply. Elias followed her through long silver corridors until they reached a vast circular hall. The floor was marked with two large symbols, one blue and one green. At the far side stood two groups of Zayari, each dressed in the colors of their house. Both sides eyed each other with obvious distrust. The queen was seated high above them on a raised platform. Her golden eyes looked down at Elias with an unreadable expression. "Commander Elias Mar of Earth," she said, her voice clear and steady, "you stand before the houses of Vera and Solon. They have argued for many cycles over the rights to a great waterway. Today you will bring them to agreement. You must do so without lies, without force, and without leaving either side in disgrace." The translator's voice echoed her words in English, though Elias hardly needed it now. He had started to understand more of the Zayari language after days of hearing it. Two representatives stepped forward, one from each house. The Vera envoy was tall, with deep green markings across his face. The Solon envoy was shorter, but with bright blue patterns on her robes. Both looked ready to speak, but the queen raised a hand. "You will hear their words first," she told Elias, "and then you may act." The Vera envoy stepped forward. "For generations," he began, "the waterway has flowed through our lands. It was our engineers who built the channels that keep it pure. The Solon have taken more than their share, leaving our crops to wither." The Solon envoy's eyes narrowed. "The waterway flows from our mountains," she said firmly. "Without us, there would be no water to take at all. The Vera have demanded more than fairness. They wish to control what is not theirs." Elias listened carefully, his mind working quickly. On Earth, disputes like this usually ended in contracts, maps, and endless meetings. But here, he had one chance to get it right. He couldn't side with one over the other. The queen's rules were clear. Both had to leave with dignity. He walked to the center of the hall. "May I ask a question to both houses?" he said. The queen nodded. "You may." Elias turned to the Vera envoy. "If you had more water, what would you do with it?" "Grow more food for our people," the envoy replied without hesitation. He turned to the Solon envoy. "If you had more control, what would you do?" "Protect our mountains and ensure no one damages the source," she said. Elias thought for a moment. This wasn't about the water itself. It was about trust. Each side feared losing something they valued. The Vera feared hunger. The Solon feared losing their mountains. He looked at the queen. "Your Majesty, may I propose an idea?" She tilted her head slightly. "Speak." Elias took a breath. "Instead of dividing the water, divide the responsibility. Let the Solon keep the source safe, as they always have, but let the Vera manage the channels and farming. Each house will care for a part of the whole, and both will share the results." The hall went quiet. The envoys looked at each other, surprised. The idea was simple, yet it meant they would have to work together instead of apart. The Solon envoy spoke first. "If the Vera agree to protect the land beyond their farms, I will accept." The Vera envoy nodded slowly. "If the Solon agree to share knowledge of the mountains, I will accept." The queen's golden eyes gleamed. "So be it," she said. "The waterway will be guarded by the Solon and tended by the Vera. You have passed the first trial, Elias Mar." A wave of relief washed over him, but he kept his expression calm. The court clapped their hands softly, the Zayari version of applause. Some smiled at him, others still looked skeptical. But now, he had succeeded. After the ceremony, Elias was walking back through the palace corridors when Lyra caught up to him. "You handled it well," she said. "Though not all will be pleased. There are those who wanted you to fail." "I noticed," Elias replied. "One of them spoke to me in the hallway last night." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "I didn't." "Get a name. He just said the last outsider vanished before the final trial." She stopped walking. "Then you must be careful. The trials test more than skill. They test survival." That evening, the Queen invited Elias to a smaller private chamber for tea. The room was lit by floating lanterns that drifted like tiny suns. The tea was pale blue and gave off a faint calming scent. "You think like no Zayari I have known," she said after a long sip. "Your kind sees paths where we see walls." "I just try to find the middle ground," Elias said. "Middle ground," the Queen repeated, tasting the words. "Sometimes middle ground is the most dangerous place to stand." Elias studied her expression. There was a faint smile there, but also something sharper. She was testing him still, not just in the trials, but in every word they spoke. "Tomorrow," she continued, "comes your second trial. It will not be about peace between two sides. It will be about finding truth, when truth itself changes." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Changes?" The Queen set down her cup. "You will understand when you stand before it." Her words left him more curious than before. What kind of truth could change? And how was he supposed to solve a problem like that? That night, he lay awake on the floating bed, staring at the glowing patterns on the ceiling. He had passed one trial, but there were still two left. The first had been difficult, the next could be impossible. Still, a quiet thought kept him from losing hope. He had come this far, and if the Queen wanted him to fail, she could have ended it already. Maybe she was truly interested in seeing what a human could do, or maybe she was just enjoying the game. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace halls as Elias walked toward the great chamber once again. The walls shimmered faintly with color, reflecting the quiet tension he felt inside. Today was no ordinary day. Today was the second trial. Lyra accompanied him silently, her silver robe brushing softly against the polished floor. She did not speak, but Elias knew she was watching him closely. The first trial had passed, but the path ahead was more uncertain. The great chamber was filled with an unusual silence. The Queen sat on her throne, her golden eyes sharp and glowing brighter than before. Around her, courtiers whispered quietly, casting curious looks at Elias. "Elias Mar," the Queen said, her voice steady and clear. "Today's trial is not about settling disputes or finding balance. Today, you face the challenge of truth, a truth that changes as you observe it. You must find what is real, even when it shifts beneath your feet." Elias blinked. He was sure he had heard her correctly, but the meaning was unclear. How could truth change? On Earth, truth was something fixed. Facts and evidence did not bend with the wind. The Queen raised a hand, and the floor before Elias lit up with a glowing map. Symbols and shapes twisted and moved, changing colors and form in a dance that made his head spin. "This is the puzzle of shifting truths," the Queen explained. "You must solve it by understanding its meaning before it changes again." Two advisors stepped forward to explain. One spoke in Zayari, the other in English, through a translator. "The puzzle shows the history of our empire," said the first advisor. "But the story changes with each observer's feelings and beliefs." Elias stepped closer and watched the symbols swirl. At one moment, the map showed the Zayari as peaceful explorers. A blink later, it changed to show a warlike people conquering others. The colors shifted, the shapes morphed. Every time he thought he understood, the story moved again. He frowned. How could he solve something so fluid? Then he remembered something his mother told him once. Look beyond the story. Find the heart of it. He sat cross-legged on the floor, focusing not on the images, but on what they made him feel. He realized that no matter how the story changed, the core was always the same. The Ziyari valued growth, survival, and unity above all. Elias reached out and placed his hand gently on the glowing floor. This puzzle isn't about one version of the past, he said aloud. It is about understanding all the versions and choosing what builds the future. The symbols stopped moving. The colors settled into a bright gold. The room filled with a warm light. The queen smiled softly. You see what others cannot, she said. Truth is not fixed. It moves with perspective and time. To lead, one must accept change without losing sight of the goal. Elias stood, feeling a mixture of relief and pride, but before he could relax, the queen's eyes narrowed. Now, she said, the final part of today's trial. The doors opened, and a small crowd entered. Among them was the mysterious man Elias had seen in the shadows, the one who warned him about the dangers ahead. He stood silently watching. The queen gestured toward Elias. You will face me in debate. Speak openly. Convince me with words alone. Elias's heart skipped. A public debate with the queen herself? This was no ordinary challenge. The courtiers gathered, forming a circle around them. The queen's voice was calm but firm. Tell me, human, what is leadership? Elias swallowed his nerves. He remembered his training, the lessons from Earth's history. Leaders were not just rulers. They were listeners, learners, and sometimes even learners from those they led. Leadership, Elias said clearly, is the courage to listen, to change, and to stand for what is right, even when it is hard. The queen nodded slightly. And what if the truth you stand for is not fixed? What if it changes? Then, Elias replied, a leader must be like water, able to adapt but always moving forward, to hold on to the future. Not just the past. A murmur ran through the crowd. The queen's golden eyes held his gaze. You speak well, human, but can you lead without fear? I think fear is part of leading, Elias said honestly. It reminds us what matters, but we cannot let it stop us. The queen smiled wider this time. Good. You have learned much. Then, quietly, she added, but remember, the trials test not only your mind, but your courage. The greatest leaders know when to stand and when to walk away. Elias looked at her carefully. Was she warning him, or was it a challenge to keep going? The room seemed to hold its breath. Then the queen rose and said, You have done well today, Elias Mar, but the final trial approaches. It will test your heart and your wisdom like never before. She turned and left the chamber, leaving Elias, surrounded by whispers and curious stares. Lyra came forward and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You will face many dangers, she said softly, but remember, the queen does not give up on those she chooses. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. As he walked back to his chambers, he thought about the puzzle, the debate, and the strange games of the queen. Was this trial truly about truth? Or was it about something deeper, the way a leader sees the world and the courage to change it? The palace lights dimmed as evening fell. Outside, the glowing gardens sparkled like stars. Inside, Elias prepared himself for the trial that would come next, one that would decide the fate not just of him, but of Earth and the Ziyari Empire. Elias woke to a strange buzzing sound filling the palace halls. The usual calm glow of the crystal walls flickered and dimmed. Something was wrong. Lyra met him outside his room, her face serious. "The capital is in crisis," she said. "The different species attending the summit cannot communicate. Tensions are rising. The Queen has chosen you to help." Elias's heart pounded. This was no ordinary challenge. It was real and urgent. He followed Lyra to the great hall where representatives of many alien species gathered. Some shouted in strange voices, others stood silent, their eyes full of suspicion. The air was thick with frustration and fear. The Queen stood before them, calm as always. "Elias Mar of Earth," she said, "you must bring peace to this gathering. Without cooperation, our alliance will fail before it begins." Elias stepped forward. He looked at the faces around him. He realized the problem was more than words. Each species had a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing the world. Their languages did not just differ in sounds, but in meaning and feeling. He remembered the lessons of the trials: balance, truth, courage, and something else. Humans were good at understanding each other, even when they spoke different tongues. Elias raised his hands. "I know you all want peace, but first, we must listen to each other, not just with ears, but with respect." The room grew quieter. A small voice spoke from the back, an alien with many eyes blinking slowly. "Respect is rare among us," it said. "We do not trust easily." Elias nodded. "I understand. On Earth we have many languages and customs, too. But we have learned that humor and kindness can open doors that words cannot." He smiled gently. "May I try something?" The room was silent, but curious. Elias began telling a simple story about a human child who tried to make friends with a stubborn animal. The story was funny, with small mistakes and surprises. At first, the aliens did not understand the words, but the feeling, the laughter, the kindness, crossed the gap. Slowly, the tension eased. Eyes brightened. Some aliens smiled, others even laughed. Elias then asked each group to share their worries and hopes, not just in words, but by showing small symbols and pictures from their cultures. With Lyra's help translating, misunderstandings turned to conversations, complaints turned to questions, anger turned to curiosity. Hours passed, but slowly the summit began to feel like a meeting of friends, not strangers. The Queen watched from her throne, a rare smile touching her lips. Finally she spoke. "Elias Mar, you have shown what humanity brings to the stars, not just words, but heart." Elias felt a warm glow inside. He had done it. He had helped unite beings so different from each other. But as the court applauded softly, the mysterious man from before approached. "Do you see now?" he said quietly. "The trials are not just tests. They are lessons. You carry the future of Earth in your hands." Elias nodded. "I understand. But the last trial remains." The man smiled faintly and disappeared into the crowd. That night, Elias sat alone in his chamber, thinking. The trials had pushed him to use every skill he had: reason, courage, humor, and understanding. He had surprised even the Queen. Tomorrow would be the final moment. The council would meet to decide his fate. Would they accept this strange human who had challenged their ways and won? Would the Queen truly keep her promise? He felt a mix of hope and fear. The weight of his world rested on what came next.